Iron Dome scandal was in the 1920s, and maybe bigger.
Oh, Rudy. He may not be excessively short or stout, but when he gets steamed up, he does tend to shout, as opposed to those of us who get a handle on things before we spout off. Anyway, okay, all right. Hillary Clinton's team spent the third day this week, and that's the third out of 3 days this week, trying to swat down questions about her family's foundation after the AP reported yesterday that more than half of Clinton's non-government meetings as Secretary of State were with donors. Over the past 24 hours, her team has pointed out that those 150 meetings were culled from more than 17,000 sit-downs Clinton held with others and officials during her tenure, and that many on the AP list, such as Nobel Peace Prize winner Muhammad Yunus, were hardly Clinton cronies and were totally appropriate for her to be meeting with as Secretary of State. Still, Republicans kept up the pressure. Trump hit Clinton at his rally in Tampa, Florida this afternoon, and Sean Spicer, the GOP communications director, newly dispatched to working out of Trump Tower, suggested that the Democratic nominee has been hiding from reporters.
Here's the interesting thing, Kate. For 263 days, Hillary Clinton has yet to face the press. If instead of sending her spokesman out to defend her, why doesn't she face the press and talk about what the work that they've done, answer some of the questions?
As it happens, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, Robbie Mook, was asked about this very thing earlier in the day by our pal Nicole Wallace on Morning Joe.
Why wouldn't you put her out there to answer questions that she can certainly handle if your defense is true?
Well, she is out there answering questions.
She's going to do a press conference today?
She's done over 300 interviews this year, and she takes questions in a variety of formats, and we're gonna keep looking at that. I guess my pushback here is that nobody's asking Donald Trump about his foreign connections.
So I'm asking you a question about why not do a press conference today as a strategy to help you eradicate the perception that there was anything shady that went down.
We're considering everything every day. She has been answering questions. She's going to continue to do that. I think all we would ask is that people don't cherry pick.
The Politico has a story out that suggests that Clinton's basic strategy, as you see there with Robbie Mook, is to run out the clock and, quote, ride out this foundation controversy until the election, because they have a comfortable lead. Alex, if that is truly the Clinton strategy, what they sometimes call the prevent defense or the four corners offense, depending on what you like.
The old four corners offense.
Whether you like football or basketball, is that a smart approach?
At this moment in time, I do not think it is a smart approach, though it is also not surprising that this is their approach. This is the playbook that they've been using for a long time, which is deny, deny, deny until it gets to a crisis point and then maybe deal with it, even though that gives the crisis longer legs, ultimately, in the end, I think. What's different about this time, I think, for the Clintons who have been in the public eye for so long is the speed of media, and with this candidate that she's running against in particular, the sort of changing weather patterns in the 2016 race. I think Clinton needs to come out and say something, anything, clarify to the public, and then move on, which is entirely possible. There may be, 3 months left. That is plenty of time for another story to take the lead.
Here's what I want to say a couple things. First of which is about this AP story. The Clinton campaign has been trying to systematically undermine it, and they've done a pretty good job. They pointed out real flaws in that story, that it only takes part of her time as Secretary of State, that it overlooks a lot of other meetings. But even if you just take the evidence as presented, it still, to my mind, is troubling. And I'm in the camp of people who thinks that even if there's no quid pro quo, the notion that there's like a fast track of access, if you write a check to the Clinton Foundation, that you can then get easy access through the foundation, through Huma Abedin, you can get in to see Hillary Clinton quicker because you wrote a check to the Clinton Foundation. Just the access point, I think, is a problem. I also think that people are going to start to point to the speaking fees and the donors who got the access, and then did they write a check to Bill Clinton to give a speech overseas? There are connections of that kind. I think she needs to do a press conference. I think she needs to do a press conference soon, in general, and I think when she does this press conference, she'd be really smart to just come out and say, you know what, we're talking about shutting this foundation down if I'm president, we're going to shut it down today, and put the whole thing behind her.
All right, there is another move the Clinton campaign has been using to fight these stories about foundation donors. For the past few days, her team has been trying to shift the focus back on Donald Trump, listing a litany of things they say deserve more reporting and more attention. That list includes Trump's reported debt to the Bank of China, his refusal to release his tax returns, and his lack of disclosure about his health. Tomorrow, Clinton is expected to give a speech accusing Trump of being embedded in the alt-right. All right, John, given all those things, that little list, that little litany, which should Trump be most worried about?
Well, I think that the biggest problem among those things, the one that's likely to have the most traction, continues to be Trump's entanglement with foreign governments, and particularly the Russia connection. I think that some of the things that have happened over the course of the past months, even with Paul Manafort no longer at the campaign, there still is smoke there. And the fact that Trump has praised Putin, that Putin clearly wants Trump to win, the fact that there are still hacked emails, we have some of those from the DNC, we have some of the DCCC, there may be more coming out, there's Russian involvement there. Russian tampering with an American election, on the surface, the prima facie case that it might be doing that in favor of Donald Trump, that is something that is unsettling to a lot of Americans and something that Donald Trump has not yet remotely put to rest.
At the risk of being boring, which I usually am not, I totally agree with you. I think the Ukraine thing, the Russian thing, you know, Russia is embedded in the lizard brain of Americans as our Cold War adversary. There is no getting around that. For even low information voters, you say this guy's in bed with Russia, it does not seem like a good thing, nor does it seem like this is the person who should be tasked with upholding the American democratic ideals. I think I am interested as to why the Trump web of financial dealings has not gotten more traction, especially given his connection to the Bank of China and his strident remarks about the Chinese.
Yes.
I tend to think that it's because the web of connections is so complicated that most people actually just kind of gave up on the story when it was first published.
I do want to focus for a second. I agree with that. I do want to focus for a second, though, on the tax returns, because it's been a bugbear of mine for months. I will say again, Donald Trump needs to release his taxes. Release your taxes, Donald Trump. But today, Eric Trump, his son, came out in public and said that he, Eric Trump, is the biggest proponent against or opponent of the idea of releasing his taxes. Donald Trump should release his taxes. It has not gotten nearly enough traction, but he really needs to do it.
3 more months still.
Okay. Bernie Sanders. Blast from the past. He's set to launch his post-campaign political group this evening. The group is called Our Revolution, and it was envisioned to continue pursuing the Sanders agenda, sort of the way that Howard Dean's grassroots organization Democracy for America did after he ran for president. But what was once a populist force that threatened to defeat Hillary Clinton, or more recently disrupt the Democratic National Convention, is now beset by turmoil as infighting over the group's leadership and fundraising have led to mass resignations. Those happened over the weekend. A lot of criticism of Jeff Weaver, the former campaign manager, who's now running that operation. The folks who helped Sanders raise more than $200 million for the Democratic nomination fight have so far only coughed up $300,000, which is not much, to support progressive down-ballot candidates. That's one of the things that group's supposed to do. So, Alex, as Bernie prepares to speak to his bros and his sisses, wither the Sanders revolution.
I mean, I am not surprised by this at all, in part because so much of the Sanders campaign message was predicated on this idea that government was broken and corrupted and full of cronyism. And now it's, okay, but we should be invested in and supporting in those running for office who are not Bernie Sanders, and we should be engaged in sort of the mechanics of government and governance and invested in it in a way, and that just seems to be fundamentally in opposition to the message that got people excited about Bernie Sanders.
I get that there are some people who quit because they don't like Jeff Weaver's style, and Jeff Weaver can be a brusque guy. But at core, I think you're right, because basically right now what this organization is not a grassroots organization to pursue an issues-based movement. What they're saying is, hey, it's an election season. Well, let's raise a bunch of money and spend that money in what Bernie Sanders spent a year telling us was a broken campaign finance system. It's sort of like, this seems a little bit establishment, the way they're going about doing this. And if I were in the Sanders revolution or trying to run the Sanders revolution, I would have figured out a different way to set this organization up so it was more issues-based rather than money and candidate-based.
All right, up next, we will talk about how the Clinton campaign is handling Donald Trump's immigration strategy. But first, these words from John's sponsors. Our first guest tonight is two guests tonight. Michael Steele, the former chair of the Republican Party, is with us from Washington, D.C. and out in California, Los Angeles. Los Angeles, California, as some human beings like to call it. Democratic strategist and former White House Deputy Press Secretary Bill Burton. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Michael Steele, I start with you, Chairman. Yeah. If one can still pivot these days in American politics, it feels like the Trump campaign is engaged in a kind of pivot, as the candidate has been talking laudably about President Obama's deportation policies as it intersects with his own immigration plan, and these sort of the last week of, if one can call it, outreach to minority voters, offering the nihilistic aspirational message, what else do you have to lose? How effective is any of this?
I don't think it's necessarily effective to those constituencies that just aren't down with Trump. I mean, I think the vast majority of the black community is long made up its mind. The number won't be 1% on Election Day, but it certainly won't be 20. So, I know that there's a lot more work to do there. Certainly on the immigration front, again, a lot of bridges burnt with the Hispanic community. But here's the rub. The narrative and the conversation, quite honestly, goes beyond those two constituencies. It's going in a really in your face, if you will, a little bit to those voters who are still on the fence, who are still undecided. Yes, there are some independent voters, et cetera, and to white female voters who, are looking at this race and starting to look at this race as this thing gets, to Labor Day and beyond. So I think it's appropriate time to sort of make that term. It's not a full pivot. We know that it's more like a slight pirouette, but it's an effort. It's an effort to kind of move the narrative in two fronts. One, as you just discussed, on Hillary Clinton, and two, to identify a little bit more with some of these other constituencies.
Bill, let me ask you this question about, you got this Washington Post story today by Rucker and Costa and Jenna Johnson. Inside Donald Trump's new strategy to counter the view of many that he is racist. Not a great headline, I would say, for a general election nominee of either party.
Imperfect, at best.
Is there any, just bluntly speaking, he's doing it a lot, though. I'm sort of surprised. I thought he might do this for a couple days and then stop. But he seems to be doing it in a sustained way, talking about African-American voters. And there's, in this story, there's reporting that he's actually going to start going to actual black neighborhoods and talking to actual black people, as opposed to talking to black people as with whites in the audience as surrogates. So
talking to mostly white people, right, I think is what you mean to say.
So I mean, seriously, does this really help with white suburban women, which is the big theory, right? That Republican-leaning white suburban women will hear this message and think, maybe he's not a racist. Is there any chance that works?
Well, I think it's certainly what he's trying to do, but it's so disingenuous. And the way that he's going about it is so condescending. To come out and talk about the African-American community like it's this monolith of jobless, crime-ridden neighborhoods. It's not. It's a lot more complicated than that. And I think the American people, particularly college-educated white women that apparently Donald Trump is trying to reach out to, are have more common sense than to think that the way Donald Trump is talking about this will have any impact. And I will say that it's not a great sign if your vice presidential nominee, Mike Pence, is laughing at the strategy in interviews. So I don't think it's going that well, with all due respect to Michael Steele, who said that it's a pirouette, not a pivot, which I think is actually more dramatic, probably. But I don't think that this is going particularly well. Oh, slight pirouette.
Slight.
But Chairman, to Bill's
point, it's like
point,
1 foot off the floor.
Well,
right.
I like that we're getting deep into choreography. Chairman, to Bill's point, isn't there a risk? You think that Donald Trump is not going to be he's going to get presumably more than 2% of the black vote in certain swing states. I just wonder, using the language that he's using, painting the picture of black America as one mired in its own poverty, people getting shot walking down the street, this sort of incredibly apocalyptic, despondent existence that apparently all black Americans live in. I mean, doesn't that run the risk of actually alienating at least some of the people that you at least optically would like to have on your side?
No, it does. It does. It is a real bifurcated argument, if you will. There's talking just about the horrors that may or may not exist in any given community is one conversation. while ignoring those good things that actually are happening, where folks are taking their own initiative. They're not necessarily relying on a program or, some government outreach or something like that, but there are genuine efforts, grassroots, native to the community, whether it's entrepreneurs, whether it's teachers, whether it's, local community leaders, who are also trying to deal with some of the systemic issues. I think what Donald Trump has to do is marry those two conversations and really sort of give a full-throated and realistic view of what's happening in the community. If you're going to talk about my community, one, show up. Two, understand exactly what's going on, the good, the bad, and the not so ugly, and then share with me how you propose to help us get to the next level.
Bill, I'm going to shift the focus here onto the Democratic side and ask you this question. You were with the Obama campaign in 2008 when President Obama, or President-elect Obama, was courting Hillary Clinton to be Secretary of State. You were in the White House when the administration started. I think we're both aware that President Obama was really wanted to have a really, really big wall between the Clinton Foundation and the Secretary of State's office when he appointed Hillary Clinton. Knowing what we now currently know, do you think that she abided by the spirit or the letter of what he wanted from her in terms of shielding herself from Clinton Foundation donors?
Absolutely. I think she absolutely did. And if you look at this story and what we're talking about, it is such a small sliver of both Clinton Foundation donors and of the meetings that she had. We're talking about 185 meetings out of 17,000. We're talking about, 85 donors out of 7,000 for the Clinton Foundation.
Bill,
if this is pay to play, not a lot of people are paying to play.
Bill, did President Obama, would you think President Obama, if I'd asked him back in December of 2008 or January 2009, whether he envisioned a State Department where Doug Band would write to Huma Abedin on behalf of Clinton Foundation donors and set up meetings with Hillary Clinton, that Barack Obama would have said, yeah, that's fine with me? Really?
I don't think the president would be engaged in what Doug Band was up to in particular, but I think that if you're talking about a Nobel laureate coming in to see the Secretary of State, someone who has done more to lift people out of poverty in the developing world, then yes, I think you would assume that person would meet with the Secretary of State.
Melinda Gates and Muhammad Yunus are probably not the best examples for the AP to have used, but if you looked at the sort of exit entry rolls at the White House, do you think President Obama would be happy if half of the quote-unquote civilians he met with were Obama campaign donors?
Well, first of all, it's not half. I mean, the analysis, it's this small, tiny sliver of the people that she met with. And yes, I have a secret for you. President Obama, while President of the United States, had meetings with people who had also given him money during the time that he was president. So it happens. When you have people who are leaders of industry or who are, leaders in the nonprofit world, yes, they do come in and they have meetings with people in government who are working on things that they are working on. So the fact that Secretary Clinton was engaged in this, I don't think should be a surprise to anyone, and I don't think should be as hyped up as it has been by the media.
All right, we have 30 seconds. Michael Steele, I know you want to jump in on this, so just go for 30 seconds.
No, I just say all that's well and good, but that's not how the American people are reading it. It's one of the reasons why they have this high level of distrust about Hillary Clinton. It's because of stuff like this.
Bill Burton, Michael Steele from Los Angeles, California, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C., D.C., Washington. Thank you for your time. Coming up, we will have a Carville classic for you. Our conversation with the Ragin' Cajun is coming up next.
what's going on?
I'll tell you what's going on. Right now in bookstores across the country, you can find the image of Donald Trump's head emerging out of an elephant's bum. This is the cover of We're Still Right, They're Still Wrong. It's written by hyper-partisan Democratic strategist and longtime Clinton super ally James Carville, who stopped by our studio last night to chat about the presidential race and the thesis of his new book.
The abbreviated version is we've had two successful Democratic presidencies sandwiched by a disastrous Republican presidency. So you would not vote Democratic as long as you don't count, you know, the time from 1992 to now. The longer case that I make, and particularly on the economy, by every measure that you can, Democrats have simply just outperformed the Republicans, and it hadn't been close. And you know, we go on from there, from issues like climate to, you know, overreaction to Ebola, to environmental regulations. One of my favorite parts of the book is that the United States Senator of North Carolina, Senator Tillis, says that he didn't think that restaurant workers should be forced to wash their hands. And I don't know about you, but I think it's kind of reasonable to assume that the guy that makes the salad washes his hands.
I'm pro-hand washing.
I'm all for
we got the hand
sanitary practices in the workworkplace.
Yeah.
Then why is Trump, what's with the idea that Trump's offering voters something new and that voters want something new?
Well,
They've got nothing left to lose.
We got to understand, you can't win with 40%.
We've said for a long time that what happened this year was Trump staged a hostile takeover of the Republican Party, right? He's not a Republican. He's changed parties 6 or 7 times. The people around him are not figures of provenance in the party. So how did that happen? I mean, the Democratic Party is basically happy with its candidate. The Republican Party is in disarray. So how did that happen?
A couple of things. The Democratic Party is more of an amalgamation of interest groups of different people that get along, but, you know, some shared things. The Republicans, you know, really, if you're you're cultivated. There was this huge fight over, quote, white working class, non-college whites. The Democrats, and God, I don't know how many meetings are in, we have to get these people, we have to fight. It's the Reagan Democrats, it was the guy with the gun rack and the pickup truck and the hunting dog. And one day we just lost them. They were gone. Bye. And they all became Republicans. And so they became a majority of the Republican Party, or at least 50%. So Trump comes in, he stimulates that demographic unbelievably. He does enormously well. And then the Republican Party has basically fractured. And to the point where a lot of people think, and I'm probably one of them, that for the first time in the history of Poland, Democrats have a chance to carry college whites, who I think are the key demographic in this cycle. They're the Reagan Democrats, the soccer moms, the veterans, the you name it. That's the key demographic here.
You think in the next 3 or 4 election cycles, the Democrats stand any chance of getting the House?
Dave Wasserman, who's my go-to guy on this, right now they need to win by 7.
7
win
points.
the House, 7 points. They need to win the House popular vote by 7. That's formidable. I mean, I hope if we don't do it this time, we won't have a chance to another. We're obviously not realistically going to do it in 2018. That's a steep hill to climb. It's not impossible. I mean, I would be shocked if we lost the presidency. I would be surprised if we didn't win the Senate.
But you think the House is...
I think the House, I think it's difficult. And I'm not going to say seldom say never, because I think that Democrats will have a good year. Will it be good enough to compensate for the combination of sorting, that is, the Democrats are always overwhelming in cities, and to some extent gerrymandered? Whenever I give a speech and somebody says, what can I do to help the Democratic Party? My answer is usually move.
All right, we'll have more of our conversation with James Carville in just a moment. And if you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can also listen to us on the radio at Bloomberg 99.1 FM. We will be right back.
You know you loved it. Now it's time to go to part 2 of our interview with the Ragin' Cajun, James Carville.
So my question about the Democratic Party for you is this. You know, it's obviously true that the Republican Party at the national level, I mean, look, the Republican Party is very successful in some respects. Most of the governorships, most of the state houses, most of the state legislatures, you know, the control of both the Senate and the House, at least at the moment. Well, Democratic Party at the presidential level was a little rocky, and I want to look forward to Hillary Clinton in this fall election in a second, but just look back for one moment. Was there any time during the Democratic nomination fight you thought she might lose to Bernie Sanders?
I can't say that I wasn't nervous, but I never thought that she would lose. And once I thought about it, it was just like in a general. People call, God, did you see this? And I get nervous, and then I come back and I think about, well, if you have to have this much of this and that much of that, then I don't get nervous.
Just looking down the road, we know we're going to get a bunch more emails. They're going to come out in October. We've got some stories that suggest a lot of Clinton Foundation donors had a lot of access to her. How much of a threat do you think it is, given that it's the biggest looming political threat I can see right now to her? How big a threat is it?
You know, I think that if I were running a campaign and giving political advice, I said you'd shut it down. As a human being, it makes me a really bad person because people are going to die. Now, no one said if Bob Dole was the majority leader, Elizabeth Dole was the head of the Red Cross, not a soul brought it up. Right. If George H.W. Bush was raising money for the Bush Library's library when his son was president, that's fine. If some lady sent me an email on these charity watchdog groups and pointed out that the points of light were started by President George H.W. Bush in 1991 while he was still in office. I think that the foundation is, you know, I'll say this and we'll move on to something else. All the things that Bill Clinton's done, the thing I'm most proud of, he stopped the genocide. The Human Genome Project is going to end up, our grandchildren is making the world as good a place, and the foundation. But the cognoscenti have decided that they don't like it, and I
think that's untrue, though. I got to stay on this question just for 1 minute, right? Like, no one thinks that the Clinton Foundation doesn't do good work. No one argues that. No one argues that, right? No. What people have argued.
They say they say it's just for the Clinton lifestyle. The Clintons just soaking for nothing.
So there's some people on the far right who say that, but by and large, people acknowledge the Clinton Foundation does good work.
It does magnificent work.
What people have, but again, I'm not challenging you on that. What people were concerned about is that the Clintons have now acknowledged that they're going to effectively get out of that business if she becomes president of the United States. Right. People look back at the time when she was Secretary of State and where donors to the foundation had access to her. It doesn't have anything to do with what the foundation's work is. It's about the access.
Give me an example of access. The Crown Prince of Bahrain, who already got the meeting through normal channels, who's probably the most important ally in the U.S. in the whole Persian Gulf.
There's big AP story yesterday about 85 of the, half the donors of the people that first visited her.
And what did they get? Nothing.
James, if it's not a problem, why are they shutting it down if she becomes president?
Because I'm telling you why. Because the press has decided that they don't like it. It never bothered them when Bob Dole was majority leader and Elizabeth Dole was the Red Cross. It never bothered them, and it didn't bother me, by the way, when President Bush started the points of light. They have to have their victory. They're going to have their victory. People are going to die.
What about the Obama White House?
What about them?
The Obama White House imposed limitations on the Clinton Foundation when Clinton took
position. But that's fine.
Well, they're not the press. But I guess if the point is the press is doing this, then why the White House do it?
The White House never said this. They can should impose whatever limitations. I am sick that as a human being that I would say you need to shut it down to satisfy a bunch of ravenous press that can't distinguish between what the hell is going on. I think I'm a sorry human being. I apologize to my children that I think that we should shut this down and let people die to satisfy some people in Manhattan and Georgetown.
So you look at the Trump campaign. You look at three big figures around Donald Trump now. Steve Bannon from Breitbart, Sean Hannity, and Roger Ailes. Three big, huge right-wing media mockers. Poobahs, right? What does that tell you about the campaign? What conclusions can we draw about how it's going to be run, about what its purpose is?
Well, look, the conspiracy, which I kind of think makes some sense, is that they are setting up to have a news network. and I think it'll probably be pay-per-view. But in the short term, it says there's actually a thought on the right that if the people actually get an undistilled message, a pure right-wing message, a pure nativist message, that the people out there are ready to rise up in revolt against the elites and the Democrats and the whole thing. We're going to see if they're right in this election cycle. But these guys, there's no moderating effect on Mr. Bannon, Mr. Hannity, and Mr. Ailes at all.
But you don't dispute. Let me just ask you about this. You don't dispute that Roger Ailes is a savvy political operative.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, you saw him run the 288 campaign.
I said he was one of the 3 best political operatives in my lifetime: Jim Baker, Roger Ailes, and David Axelrod.
So is he not someone to be, if you were running the Clinton campaign, which I know you're not,
right.
But were you not worried at all about the fact that someone put aside Steve Bannon and Sean Hannity for a moment?
Yeah,
you're not a little concerned about Roger Ailes' involvement over there? Just a matter of pure campaign mechanics?
Right. Well, I don't know about campaign mechanics, but I think the media, the way he understands stuff, yes, I think he's very formidable.
What about as that intersects with debate prep?
I think that she's going to do fine debates. Look, Trump has never had a debate, a one-on-one debate. If you debate 16 people, that's entirely different. She has debated President Obama any number of times. She had one-on-ones with Bernie Sanders. She does fine in debates. I'm really, and I shouldn't say this, but you're supposed to tamper expectations down. I expect her to do great.
She's going to clean his clock, you think?
I don't know if she's going to clean his clock, but she'll do great.
There's been some discussion about the possibility of James Carville being the stand-in for Donald Trump in her debate. First of all, is there any truth to that?
Right.
Is there any truth to that?
There's absolutely no truth, and it would be stupid for me to do it, and I'll tell you why. In order to do this right, it takes about 100 hours of prep. You have to sit there and listen to every answer that Donald Trump gives, every comeback that he gives, and basically the people that do this have to have a staff. There is no way that James Carville is going to sit down and listen and look at 100 hours of tape of Donald Trump. It is not going to be
Resource management.
No.
So who should play Trump?
I'm partial to Bob Barnett, but he's an old friend of mine. He played, Bush in '92, but I don't know what they're going to do.
He's the least Trump-like person I've ever met in my life.
He has a babysitter. But they will, again, I'm any number of people that I don't know that are in politics now, but it's got to be somebody who sits and knows every answer to every question that he's ever given. And the only way that you can do that is you have to go through all of the tapes, all of the questions. It can't be done any other way, but unbelievable preparation.
Do you think the country will ever come back together to the moment where we used to have, like, landslide elections?
Look, I think that the Republican Party, I wrote a book in 2008, and I said 40 more years, that as construed that they were all, it was very difficult to win a presidential election. What will happen in this election, I can tell you exactly what's going to happen. The Wall Street Journal editorial page and people on the right are going to say, but this election didn't count. She really didn't win because she beat Trump, who wasn't Republican, so we have to wait. So she really shouldn't appoint anybody to the Supreme Court. We need to wait to have a real election in 2020. I can already tell you this is exactly what's going to happen.
Our many thanks to James Carville. Again, his new book is We're Still Right, They're Still Wrong. Up next, we'll hear from voters along the crucial I-4 corridor in Florida right after this.
Donald Trump's rally this afternoon was in Tampa, the city at the southern tip of the famous I-4 corridor in Florida, a stretch of highway that runs through the middle of the Sunshine State that represents nearly 1.5 million voters with no clear party affiliation. To get a sense of how people in that area are viewing this presidential race, we asked our resident auteur, Griffin Hammond, to brave the 100-degree heat on a road trip through the heart of the aforementioned Sunshine State.
I'm driving the 132-mile stretch of highway from Daytona Beach to Tampa. This interstate, the I-4, runs across central Florida, beginning in Volusia County, which voted for Obama in 2008, then Romney in 2012. The I-4 corridor is the ultimate battleground region in the ultimate battleground state. At exit 108, I came across a dog park where I met Matthew.
It's more awkward than it ever has been as a liberal to go talk to a conservative about politics. It's just kind of really frustrating. So I definitely don't want to vote in a way that enables the political divide to keep going wider and wider.
So he says he's considering a third-party vote. And as an undergrad studying psychology, Matthew says presidential candidates tend to have alarming character traits.
Yeah, so as it happens, actually, there's something called the dark triad. Politicians tend to have overrepresented traits of psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism. One of the best case studies you could look at in terms of trying to apply what you learn in a textbook, but at the same time it's really destructive and awful for everyone else, so It's a little discouraging. But
probably one of the most important elections in our history. I think it's time that America comes together, unites together, and starts putting Americans first. The first time I ever ran for office, I'm a Gulf War veteran, and I just think it's time for me to get engaged again and serve my community. I already did my country. I want to serve my community now, and the next president will choose probably between 3 and possibly 5 new justices. So I tell people, you may not like Trump, but you know what? I'm going to vote for Trump because he has a stronger platform in terms of constitutional justice, which to me will make a huge difference because this next president will define our country for the next 30, 40 years.
While I never saw any presidential billboards along I-4, Tanya in Orlando says she's been inundated with TV ads.
There's a lot here, a lot. So you just kind of start to, I think, tune it out because it's just a lot of the same old stuff, you know. Hillary's a liar, so is Trump.
Recently, like, my mom turned on the news and she was like, I was hearing about Donald Trump and how he was actually, like, apologizing for the things that he said. I don't know what specifically, but he was just like, I regret some of the stuff. And then people were like, wait, he regrets? Well, I'm not going to take, like, one simple sorry. It's going to take him, like, a couple of years for him to, like, maybe gain back my trust.
That would be the first freedom that I gave you, was freedom of your opinion, right? She right now is in favor for Hillary, but I'm in favor of Trump right now.
At home, we're always fighting. We'll see something on the news, he'll say something, and I'll, like, interrupt him, and I'll start yelling, and my mom will either join my side. Sometimes she'll end up going on his side.
Would I want more tact from Donald Trump? Better choice of words? Yes.
I'm not leaning towards Trump. I'll say that. That's absolutely. And it amazes me that he's made it this far. Like, I think everybody, oh, it's a joke, and it's scary. It really is.
Oh, you are sweet.
I've been a special education teacher for 37 years. I've kind of always been for the underdog.
I told Carolyn it's been hard for me to get most Floridians to talk politics on camera.
People are mum about it, like they don't bring it up because they don't want the controversy. And I think it's not a good thing. It needs to be a more open conversation about the events of our time and how we need to solve those problems, not I'm this and I'm that and you can't talk me out of it.
This country is not a business. You cannot run it as a company. The mistake I do, it's going to go around radius maybe 50 feet. But the mistake from his side will take the whole world.
But just as a rainstorm started, Khalil told me he trusts I-4 corridor voters will make the right decision in November.
You know, there is a lot of wise people here. I pray that they take the right decision. What's going to affect us in the long run.
Up next, we go to debate prep school with a Sarah Palin impressionist. Former governor of Michigan, Jennifer Granholm, joins us next.
Governor Palin, nuclear Iran is one of our gravest threats. What would a McCain administration do to stop it?
On the subject of nuclear Iran, Senator Biden and I are most likely in agreement. They cannot be allowed to acquire nuclear weapons, period. We will fight for it. And there is only one man in this race who has really ever fought for you, and that's Senator John McCain.
That was Julianne Moore playing Sarah Palin in the HBO movie Game Change. Maybe you've heard of it. As the potential vice president prepared for her big debate. Our next guest knows a thing or two about playing Palin in debate prep. Jennifer Granholm is the former governor of Michigan and current senior advisor to the group Correct the Record. She was also the stand-in for Sarah Palin during Joe Biden's prep for the 2008 vice presidential debate. Governor Granholm, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Tell us how you ended up playing Sarah Palin in that debate prep.
It's a great question. You know, I got a call saying, would I do it? And I think they probably picked me because I was not a Washington insider as a governor. I was a governor. She was a governor. I would think I was the only governor who had small children at home or young children at home. And so there were a lot of similarities in terms of our personal circumstances. So they called and I accepted. And I heard you talking to James Carville earlier. And yeah, it requires a huge amount of prep.
So, Governor, this is the reason we're talking to you about this. Of course, right now there's a lot of speculation about who is going to play Donald Trump in the debate prep with Hillary Clinton, who's going to play Hillary Clinton in the debate prep with Donald Trump. And these are both large challenges because both those people are pretty famous. And at least in one case, they have a really outsized personality. Just how did you talk about the prep? What did you do to actually try to transform yourself into Sarah Palin?
Yeah, you know, if you're going to play the person, you have to internalize them. You have to believe. You have to really become that character and believe in that character. Even though it's in Sarah Palin's case, obviously there was a lot of terrible stories leading up to that. I went in and I watched every single debate she had ever done. I watched all of her statements. I read everything about it that I possibly could. I knew what persona she brought to this match with John McCain, so that I was able to, once I got there, to be able to try out some both lines of attack on Joe Biden as well as respond in the way I thought that Sarah Palin would respond.
Governor, one of the hurdles, it sounds like, for anybody who's going to play Trump in these debates is someone who's willing to sort of assault verbally or rhetorically, however you want to describe it, Secretary Clinton in the way that Trump might on the debate stage. I mean, there's a lot of thinking that he's going to sort of open up the cannon fodder, if you will, when they take the debate stage. And who is brave enough to do that to Secretary Clinton in debate prep? Talk to us about playing Palin and how worried how much of a concern that was for you.
You know, first of all, I mean, the candidate that you are assisting as a stand-in is, you know, they're mature. They understand that they've got to go through this. It is not a pleasant experience. They know that the opposition research that the other side has is all potential game in a debate. And we can have the conversation about whether it's good strategy for Donald Trump to do that, but certainly Hillary Clinton has to be prepared for it. So the person who stands in has got to be willing to go there. And in fact, if they don't go there, they're not doing their job, because they have to, you know, get her used to this line of attack, no matter what it is. And so they're going to come at her 12 different ways on issues that may seem wholly unfair, but she's got to get comfortable with the answer. It's comfortable enough with the answer that she can respond, that she can pivot to an attack on him if she wants to, or, you know, come out with a zinger, or come and answer in a way that makes her above the lowness potentially of the attack. But you got to practice it over and over again. It's not easy.
All right, Governor, I'm going to make you a casting director right now. All right, who'd be a good Trump?
You know, I'm of the theory that Trump is so odd as a candidate that you might want to bring in a couple of different people. I like the idea of someone like Mark Cuban, but I'm not sure that because he's an outsider and he's a business guy and brings, you know, if you bring in a traditional politician, you might not be thinking like an outsider business guy. But you have to have somebody who's willing to put aside their life for, a couple of weeks to be able to do that. I'm not sure that he could do that. So, I think that they have an array of people who could easily don the mantle, don the whatever of Donald Trump. But I only say that because, of course, I had glasses. I didn't wear a wig, but, you know, you have to embody the persona. But I kind of like the idea of putting a few people in there, assuming that they're trusted people, because you don't want them coming out of the prep blabbing away.
What about Rendell? Come on, you know you like the idea of Rendell.
I love Rendell. I love him. I love him. He just has to sign a non-disclosure agreement.
That is one. I mean, can you just share with us, was there one awkward moment you can share from debate prep when you did it?
I am not saying a word, but there were definitely awkward moments. They're definitely, because you want them to have there be awkward moments, right? You want to go to a place where your candidate is totally uncomfortable. And in fact, you know, if you're doing this right, the people who are running the debate prep are feeding you lines as the stand-in that they know are going to come across to make the candidate very uncomfortable. But it's all for the greater good, because you want to inoculate them against what they know may be coming. And I would just say, just on this issue, I'm just not sure. If I were on the other side and looking at Donald Trump, you know, you have to be careful about how harsh you're going to come across, too. I mean, ultimately, the goal coming out of these debates is to have people like you, right?
It sounds like a sort of plum, but also unenviable job. Jennifer Granholm, former governor, great to see you. Thanks for your time. We'll be right back.
One quick mea culpa correction before we go. Earlier, I said that Hillary Clinton's team is stressing that she met with a lot of people while she was Secretary of State. The correct number of meetings she held during her tenure is around 1,700, not 17,000, as I foolishly said. Head to BloombergPolitics.com right now to read all about why Trump's big tax cuts aren't exactly swaying the nerds in Silicon Valley. Coming up on Bloomberg West, the co-founder of Red Rocks and the managing director of Sorensen Capital. Alex, will you be back tomorrow?
I will.
Okay, I say sayonara. Alex says
namaste.